Hey, this is Rama from Creations Landscape Designs and the Orthopreneur Landscapes blog. This video is going to be about 7 principles of landscape design. I made this video in the past many years ago and I thought it was time for a redo. But before I go into the video, I make videos about drought-tolerant plants, California native plants, sustainability, a bit of art, and anything and everything in between. So if you'd like to get more of that content in your feed, then hit the red subscribe button. All right, let's do this. The first principle of landscape design is actually 3 in 1. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Reduce as in creating a garden that's drought tolerant, low maintenance, doesn't need a lot of water, that you can putter in maybe once a month or once every couple of months. Reuse as in taking things that are already in your landscape and being able to reuse them. For example, in this image in Huntington Beach, this garden was installed last year. We took chunks of what was the driveway after it had been dug up to create a path with decomposed granite from the front door to the street. Or, for example, in this garden in Costa Mesa, designed and installed in 2009, we took chunks of the old driveway and made a bench out of it. This is the same garden in Costa Mesa. We had some concrete and brick left over from when we had done the brick patio, and we reused it in the side yard, sprinkled some seeds and figured things would germinate. Also, recycle. So for example, in this garden in Mission Viejo, the homeowners had rain tanks installed. Now what happens here is that whatever water is collected in these rain tanks can be recycled to irrigate the landscape with or irrigate the potted plants with. The second principle of landscape design is symmetry. As you'll notice in this picture, there is a blue pot on either side and it's planted exactly the same. This creates a focal point as you enter the front yard. It's symmetrical. Or as you'll notice in some of these other pictures, there is some sort of symmetry happening within the landscape, from the plant material to the other hard surface materials that are used. The point is that it's a little bit of symmetricalness in the garden, if that makes any sense. Or let's say, for example, you have a square planter, and at one end of the planter you put 3 ground covers. You should repeat the same at the other planter. So if you have 2 planters, you plant something in one planter, you should symmetrically plant something of the same in the other planter. Now you don't necessarily need to repeat the quantity. You could put 3 of one plant in that one planter and 5 of the same plant in the other planter if the other planter is big enough to handle other quantities. But the point is that you're creating a symmetrical, visually appealing space. The third principle of landscape design is focalization. For example, this is a giant existing tree and there's a deer statue in front of it. You drive by that house and immediately it catches your eye. It's a definite focal point. Or for example, there's a grouping of pottery within one of the pots, kumquats, growing in this garden, which is in the city of Orange. Then, in this particular garden, there's a small grouping of pots with native plants growing from the pottery. This is by the front door. It creates a little focal point. In this particular garden, also in the city of Orange, there's a dry riverbed in the front yard. And it almost looks like there's a pot where the rocks are coming from. And actually, that pot is broken at the bottom of it, which was already broken, and the homeowner had it and wanted to reuse it, so we reused it here. Now in this project, this is a garden in North Tustin. It's the evening time, and the lighting highlights a little grouping. It creates a focal point that's something visually nice and pleasing to look at. The fourth principle of landscape design is simplicity. So here's the thing. If you're going to put any plants in your garden, in the beginning, they're going to look sparse. which is what is supposed to happen, because you want the young plants to mature and flourish in your garden. That's why we always recommend get the plants in a smaller size. Let me explain it this way. If, let's say, for example, you get a 15-gallon tree of some sort, and then you also plant a 24-inch box tree, same plant. In a year, both those plants are going to probably look exactly the same. That's why you want to start young. You want to start smaller in size so that the plant has a longer life to acclimate into your garden. And that is why when you are planting, you want to make sure that if a plant's going to get 3 feet wide, you leave that much room for the plant to grow and mature. And you may also wish to consider, like this image here, a minimalistic garden where there isn't a lot of plant material. The fifth principle of landscape design is repetition. Now, when we are planting in a garden, we always say that things visually look better in odd numbers, and the same is true if you're designing the interior of your space. 3s, 5s, 7s. As you'll notice in these images, certain plants are repeated en masse, more than just one of that plant, because it visually looks better. It is more appealing to the eye, and especially with the ones that have colorful flowers, it's even more beautiful and more appealing. That's why you want to have plants in 3s, 5s, 7s, but at the same time, don't go planting 3 of every variety. You want to switch it up a bit and maybe have 3 of one variety and 7 of one variety, or even 9 of one variety. You don't necessarily need hundreds of different varieties of plants. It's always better to, in my opinion, have a limited species quantity of plants, but more of them. The sixth principle of landscape design is proportion. Now, what this refers to, for example, is, let's say, having plants of different heights. Because when you're planting a garden, you don't want everything to be the same height. You want some sort of visual interest. So you may have a plant that's maybe a few inches tall that is low to the ground as your ground cover. Then you have something taller, and then you have something taller, and you have something taller behind that. And it visually kind of draws your eye to look at different things in different heights. Or, for example, if you look at this image where there's a dry creek bed, there's a bridge, so naturally you have to cross over the bridge to get to the other side. But visually and proportionately, there's plants on either side. Or, for example, this image of a garden, which happens to be in the city of Long Beach, which was done in 2012. We used recycled rubber as part of the mulch because the homeowner wanted to experiment with it. But on either side of it, there's decomposed granite used as mulch, proportionately creating a well-balanced garden. Or this dry creek bed in the city of Huntington Beach. Proportionately, there's plants on either side of it. But one thing that you also should consider is the architecture of your home. Maybe there's a certain feature in the architecture of your home, like a curved wall, or that you might want to replicate in the garden, or maybe you have brick that you might want to replicate in the garden. So, for example, in this image, there was already brick attached to the house. The homeowner loves brick, as do I, and we replicated that in the garden through the paving. The seventh and final principle of landscape design is enclosure. Now, in some cases, depending on your garden, you might want to create an enclosed space. So the first image here, it's a garden in Costa Mesa, a front yard. Now, you can see there's something behind the plants. Jumping to the second image, oh, there's a fire pit behind all that plants. You wouldn't know it's there unless you directly walked up to it. It's enclosed. This is an image of a garden in Costa Mesa. I can't remember exactly when this was installed, but many years ago. This is a little enclosed covered area where you can sit with a cup of coffee. This is a garden in Tustin. You can see from the plant material. There's a bunch of rocks, but in the distance you can tell that there's a chair and potentially a table, and then boom, this is what it looks like. This is a garden in the city of Fullerton. You have to cross a bridge to get to the other side, which is an enclosed space amongst all of the existing plant material. It's about creating kind of like a secret area within a garden.